The sky above the planet was usually filled with the noise of a billion voices. Satellites, radios, and old television signals blasted into space, creating a constant wall of sound. For 10 years, the Galactic Coalition had listened to this noise. They watched the blue planet with hard eyes and cold machines. They said humans were too dangerous. They said humans were too violent to be allowed in the stars. So, they built a wall of ships around the solar system. They called it a protective blockade. Humans called it a cage. On Tuesday, the noise stopped. It did not happen slowly. It happened all at once, like a switch had been flipped. 1 second, the monitors on the bridge of the Arbiter were flashing with chaotic data streams from Earth. The next second, they were flat. Silence. High Admiral Forlax stood on the command deck. He was tall, even for his species, with skin that looked like gray stone and eyes that were entirely black. He looked at the main screen. The blue planet turned slowly below him. Usually, the screen was full of red lines showing traffic, text messages, and military signals. Now, there was nothing. Just the blue and white marble of the Earth. "Report," Forlax said. His voice was like gravel grinding together. His tactical officer, a smaller creature with 4 arms, typed quickly on a holographic keyboard. "Sir, all signals from the surface have ceased. No internet. No radio. No military radar. It is silent." Forlax narrowed his black eyes. "A malfunction." "We do not think so, sir. It is too complete. It looks like they turned everything off." "Turned it off?" Forlax let out a sound that was like a laugh. "Why would the humans turn off their own noise? They love their noise." "Perhaps they are finally surrendering," the tactical officer suggested. "Maybe they are accepting their place in the coalition." Forlax nodded. This made sense to him. For years, the humans had fought the blockade in small ways. They had tried to sneak ships out. They had hacked the alien satellites. But they always failed. They were primitive. They used combustion engines and metal bullets. The coalition used energy shields and fusion drives. Forlax believed that the humans had finally realized they could not win. He believed they had given up. "Prepare a diplomatic shuttle," Forlax ordered. "I will go down there myself. I will accept their surrender. The galaxy will see that the coalition is benevolent. We will tame the beasts." Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Commander James Miller sat in a cold, dark room. This was the primary command bunker for the Earth Defense Force. It was a massive complex, buried under a mile of solid rock. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and stale coffee. James looked old. He had gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting a war of diplomacy for 10 years, and he had lost every battle. But today, he was not trying to talk. "Status," James said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Lieutenant David Kim sat at the console next to him. David was young, with sharp features and quick hands. He looked at his screens. "Sir, all civilian hubs are offline. New York, London, Seoul, Tokyo, all dark. The satellites are shut down. The power grids are disconnected." "And the shelters?" James asked. "Full capacity," David replied. "Everyone is underground. The streets are empty." James nodded slowly. He looked at the large screen on the wall. It showed a view of the Earth from space. For 10 years, the alien ships had hung there like swords over their heads. The aliens, with their superior technology, had treated Earth like a zoo. They thought humans were animals that needed to be controlled. They had made a mistake. They thought human technology was weak because it was simple. They thought human strategy was clumsy because it was aggressive. They did not understand that humans were at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. "Sir, I have a report from the lunar base," David said. "The Vanguard is in position." James smiled a small, tight smile. The EDS Vanguard was humanity's secret. It looked like a mining ship on the outside. It was slow, ugly, and covered in dust. But on the inside, it was something else. It carried the largest railgun ever built by human hands. It was a brute weapon, a simple concept taken to an extreme. It used magnets to fire a heavy metal slug at a fraction of the speed of light. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated. It was just a very big hammer. "And the ground forces?" James asked. "In position," David said. "They are waiting. They are very quiet, sir." James stood up. He walked to the center of the room. He looked at the faces of his staff. They were scared, but they were ready. They were men and women who had been pushed around for too long. The aliens had taken their resources. They had blocked their trade. They had looked down on them with those black, alien eyes. "They think we are silent because we are afraid," James said to the room. "They think the silence means we are broken. They are about to learn what happens when you poke a sleeping bear." Above the planet, Forlax was impatient. He sat in his personal shuttle, a sleek silver ship that glowed with soft blue light. He descended through the clouds. The atmosphere was turbulent. The shuttle shook slightly. "Scan the surface," Forlax ordered his pilot. "Show me the surrender party." The main screen of the shuttle flickered. It showed a view of the ground. They were approaching the east coast of what the humans called North America. It was a major city. A place called New York. Forlax leaned forward. He expected to see crowds of humans waving white flags. He expected to see their leaders kneeling on the ground. The screen showed the city. The skyscrapers stood tall against the gray sky. The streets were wide and empty. There were no cars. There were no people. The city looked like a graveyard. "Where are they?" Forlax hissed. "Where are the millions?" "Thermal scans show minimal heat signatures, sir," the pilot reported. "The city is empty." "Impossible," Forlax said. "Where did they go?" "They must be hiding in fear," the pilot said. "They know you are coming." Forlax sat back in his seat, feeling pleased. It was good that they feared him. Fear was a useful tool. He would land in the center of the city. He would demand they come out. He would make an example of their leaders. "Take us to the park," Forlax commanded. The large open space in the center. The shuttle banked and descended toward the green patch of land in the middle of the concrete jungle. In the bunker, David Kim touched a button on his headset. He spoke softly. "This is command. Eagle has landed." "I repeat, Eagle has landed." James Miller watched the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked forward. Tick. 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 They had a plan. It was a simple plan. It did not involve complex negotiations. It did not involve treaties. The aliens had broken every promise they ever made. They had taken human scientists and never returned them. They had destroyed human ships that tried to leave the atmosphere. The plan was called Protocol Zero. It was the final option. It was the option you used when you did not care about the rules anymore. "Open a channel to the alien flagship," James said to David. "Channel open, sir," David said. James took a deep breath. He picked up the microphone. He spoke clearly, but not loudly. "This is Commander James Miller of the Earth Defense Force. You have invaded our territory for the last time. You have enslaved our people and stolen our future. You asked for silence. You have it. But do not mistake our silence for surrender. Do not mistake our patience for weakness." Forlax, in his shuttle, heard the voice come through the speakers. He sneered. He pressed the button to respond. "Commander Miller," Forlax said, his voice booming over the city. "Your threats are empty. You are primitive. You are alone. Surrender now, and the coalition will be merciful. My fleet will turn your planet to glass if you do not." James looked at David. David nodded. He looked pale, but his hand was steady on the console. "We know about your fleet, Forlax," James said. "We have been watching you, just as you have been watching us. You came here to conquer. Instead, you will leave. Or you will burn." In the shuttle, Forlax laughed. He signaled to his pilot. "Land the ship. Prepare the guard. We will drag these humans out of their holes." The shuttle touched down on the grass of the great park. The ramp lowered. Forlax walked out, surrounded by his elite guard. They wore shining armor and held plasma rifles. The air was cool. The city was perfectly silent. No birds sang. No sirens wailed. Just the wind blowing through the empty streets. Forlax looked around. He felt a strange sensation. It was a prickle on the back of his neck. It was instinct. He was a predator, but suddenly, he felt like prey. "Commander," the pilot said from inside the ship, her voice urgent. "I am detecting high-energy spikes." "From what?" Forlax asked, looking at the empty buildings. "There is nothing here." "From everywhere," she said. Suddenly, the ground shook. It was not an earthquake. It was the sound of heavy machinery waking up. In the bunker, James Miller gave the order he had been waiting 10 years to give. "Execute," he said. David typed the command. Around the world, things began to happen that the aliens had never seen before. In New York, manhole covers did not just open, they exploded into the air. But they were not thrown by human hands. They were pushed up by automated turrets rising from the sewers. The skyscrapers began to change. The glass facades flickered and vanished. They were not glass at all. They were holograms. Underneath the illusion of glass windows were heavy metal plates and missile launchers. The city had been a disguise. Forlax stared in shock as the peaceful city transformed into a fortress. "Fire!" James Miller ordered. High above the earth, the silence was shattered. The orbital railguns, hidden behind fake asteroids and debris, opened fire. The sound was not a bang, but a hum of incredible power. Tungsten rods, moving at 10 times the speed of sound, slammed into the coalition cruisers. There were no explosions in space, but the ships crumpled like paper cans. 3 cruisers, the pride of the coalition fleet, were torn apart in seconds. They broke into pieces, their debris burning up as they fell toward the atmosphere. In the park, Forlax watched the sky burn. His ships were falling. The impossible was happening. The humans were fighting back. And they were not fighting with sticks and stones. They were fighting with weapons that should not exist. "We are under attack." The pilot screamed over the comms. "All ships, retreat! Retreat! It was too late. The silence of Earth was broken. The day had begun. The galaxy would soon know that humanity was not quiet because they were weak. They were quiet because they were hunting. The sky was no longer blue. It was painted with streaks of fire and smoke. The debris of the alien cruisers burned bright red as they fell from orbit. Forlax stood in the park, his black eyes wide with disbelief. He looked up at the destruction. Ships that had represented the supreme power of the Galactic Coalition were now just falling rocks. The ground beneath his feet shook as the shock waves from the high-altitude explosions hit the city. He turned to look at his guard. They were nervous. Their plasma rifles trembled in their hands. They had never fought a battle like this. They had always fought from orbit, safe and distant. Now, they were on the ground, in the open, in the middle of a hornet's nest. Back to the ship. Forlax roared. Get us off this planet. The pilot's voice screamed in his earpiece. Admiral. We cannot lift off, the engines are jammed. Something is interfering with our lift drives. Forlax looked at the shuttle. The silver ship sat crookedly on the grass. It was not just broken. It was trapped. He looked around the park. The silence was completely gone. It was replaced by a low, mechanical humming sound. It was coming from everywhere. Suddenly, the ground erupted. Not just where they were, but all across the city. Manhole covers flew 50 feet into the air. Heavy steel turrets rose from the sewers on hydraulic lifts. They were not elegant designs. They were blocky, rough, and painted with dull gray anti-rust coating. But the barrels of the guns were huge. These were not defensive weapons. These were offensive monsters. Forlax saw one of the turrets rotate. It pointed directly at his shuttle. There was no beeping warning. There was no demand for surrender. The turret just fired. A shell the size of a human torso slammed into the shuttle. The silver ship crumpled like a soda can. The explosion threw Forlax and his guards to the ground. Shrapnel flew like knives, cutting into the armor of the aliens. Forlax crawled through the dirt, his ears ringing. He was a high admiral. He commanded fleets from a comfortable chair. He was not a soldier. He had never been this close to death. He looked up. The turret was reloading. But it was not aiming at him anymore. It was aiming at the sky. In the command bunker deep underground, James Miller watched the tactical map. It was a sea of red dots. Red dots were enemy targets. Green dots were human defenses. 10 minutes ago, the map was mostly empty. Now, the cities of the world were glowing green. Report, James said. He did not shout. He did not need to. Sir, urban defense grids are active, David Kim said. His voice was fast and sharp. New York, London, Shanghai, Moscow, every major city is engaging the landing forces. The aliens dropped about 5,000 troops in total. They are trapped. James looked at a video feed from the streets of London. It showed a squad of alien soldiers marching down a street. They looked confident. They were looking for buildings to hide in, thinking they would find soft targets. Instead, the buildings shot back. The sides of the office buildings seemed to peel away. Thick steel shutters slid down, covering the glass. Then, sections of the wall flipped open. Rocket launchers poked out. They fired in unison. The alien squad vanished in a cloud of smoke and fire. It was not a battle. It was an extermination. They used ground troops, James said, shaking his head slightly. They walked into a kill box. They expected us to hide, sir, David said. They expected us to be scared. They didn't expect us to turn our cities into bombs. In New York, Forlax gathered his remaining guards. There were only 10 left. The shuttle was a burning wreck. They had to move. They could not stay in the open park. The turrets on the ground were firing at the falling debris, creating a deadly rain of metal. Into the city. Forlax ordered. Find cover. We must make it to a transmitter. They ran toward the nearest street. The buildings loomed over them, tall and dark. As they ran, Forlax saw the true horror of the human trap. The city was not just empty. It was a machine. He saw a manhole cover sliding shut down a side alley. He caught a glimpse of a human face in the dark before it disappeared. The humans were down there. They were underground. They were safe while the aliens were up here, waiting to die. Suddenly, a roar echoed through the concrete canyons. It was the sound of heavy engines. Forlax turned to see a massive vehicle turning the corner. It was an Earth tank. But it looked different than the tanks in the history books. It was larger. It had extra armor plates welded over the tracks. It moved with a rumble that shook the pavement. The tank stopped. The main gun, a long smooth barrel, rotated toward the aliens. Take cover! Forlax screamed. He dove behind a concrete bench just as the tank fired. The shell hit the remains of the shuttle. The explosion was blinding. Forlax felt the heat singe his skin. Dirt and rocks pelted his armor. He scrambled up, coughing in the smoke. His guards were gone. He was alone. Fear, a cold and alien sensation, gripped his chest. He looked at the tank. A hatch on top opened, and a human soldier climbed out. The soldier wore a helmet with a black visor. He carried a heavy machine gun. The soldier did not say anything. He did not gloat. He just raised the gun. Forlax ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life. He scrambled over rubble, slid under a truck, and disappeared into a dark subway entrance. The bullets chewed up the concrete behind him, but he did not stop. He did not look back until he was deep in the darkness of the subway tunnel. He sat on the dirty floor, breathing hard. He listened. He could hear the distant thud of human guns. He could hear the screams of his soldiers. The silence was truly dead. The planet was screaming war. High above the planet, the battle in space was even more intense. The EDS Vanguard drifted like a ghost among the stars. Captain Robert Wilson stood on the bridge. He looked nothing like the alien commanders. He wore a simple leather jacket and had a cup of coffee in his hand. Enemy ships are forming a perimeter, Wilson said calmly. They are scared. Yes, Captain, the helmsman replied. They are trying to regroup. They don't know where the shots are coming from. Wilson took a sip of coffee. We have their attention. Good. Let's give them something to think about. The Vanguard was not a normal battleship. It was built for stealth. Its hull was made of a material that absorbed radar and light. It was painted black, the black of deep space. The engine exhaust was chilled to match the background temperature of the universe. To the alien sensors, the Vanguard was just a patch of empty space. Load the main gun, Wilson ordered. Target the enemy carrier. The Goliath, sir, that is the biggest ship they have. I know, Wilson said. That's why I picked it. The Goliath was a massive ship, 10 times the size of the Vanguard. It was bristling with weapons and shields. It was the symbol of coalition power. It was currently turning its broadside to fire on Earth's moon bases. Firing solution locked, the weapons officer said. Fire. A silent flash of light erupted from the vanguard. A railgun slug, traveling at 20,000 miles per hour, crossed the distance between the ships in less than a second. The slug hit the Goliath near its engines. The shield flared bright blue and then shattered. The slug punched through the thick metal armor of the carrier. It exited the other side and kept going into space. A second later, the internal magazines of the Goliath exploded. The ship snapped in half. Two burning pieces of metal floated silently, surrounded by a cloud of escape pods. Hit confirmed, the helmsman said. The Goliath is breaking up. Wilson nodded. They relied on their shields. They never thought we would build a gun big enough to break them. Arrogance. Back in the bunker, David Kim watched the destruction of the Goliath. Sir, the carrier is down. The enemy fleet is in chaos. They are breaking formation. James Miller watched the screen. He saw the red dots scattering. They were running. The coalition was used to fighting organized battles. They were used to enemies who followed rules. But humans did not follow rules. Humans hid in the dark. Humans built bombs inside office buildings. Humans shot first and asked questions never. They are trying to retreat out of the gravity well, James said. David, are the orbital platforms ready? Yes, sir. The harpoons are loaded. The harpoons were Earth's secret weapon for space combat. They were simple satellites. They had a small engine and a very large bomb attached to them. They were like kamikaze drones, but they were remote controlled. Target their engines, James ordered. Do not let them leave. In space, the coalition fleet turned to run. They realized too late that the cage was locked. Hundreds of small, cheap-looking satellites detached from hidden stations. They accelerated toward the fleeing alien ships. The aliens tried to shoot them down with point defense lasers, but there were too many. The harpoons struck. Nuclear explosions bloomed in the silence of the void. The shock waves slammed into the alien ships, knocking out their engines and communications. Ship after ship was disabled, left drifting and helpless around the blue planet. High Admiral Forlax sat in the dark subway tunnel. He checked his wrist computer. The signal was dead. He was cut off. He saw the map of his fleet turning from blue to red. Destroyed. Disabled. Captured. He stood up and walked deeper into the tunnel. He needed to get to a secure line. He needed to tell the Galactic Council what had happened. But as he walked, he saw something on the wall. It was graffiti, sprayed with bright neon paint. It was a simple message. Welcome to Earth. Forlax stared at it. He realized then that the humans had not been silent for 10 years because they were weak. They had been quiet because they were busy. They had been busy preparing a tomb for anyone who came to threaten them. The silence was over. And the sound that replaced it was the sound of a species fighting for its life, a species that was suddenly very, very loud. Forlax shivered. The predators had become the prey. The battle for Earth had shifted from a surprise attack to a brutal war of attrition. The initial silence of the planet was replaced by the roar of explosions and the crackle of energy weapons. In the cold vacuum of space, the remaining coalition ships were regrouping. They were confused. Their tactical computers, which were designed to predict enemy movements, were failing. The humans were not following the logic of war that the galaxy had used for 1,000 years. Captain Robert Wilson stood on the bridge of the EDS Vanguard. The ship shook as a blast of enemy plasma fire splashed against its hull. The shields flickered but held. Wilson did not look worried. He looked focused. He was an older man with hair the color of iron and a face that had seen too much combat. "They are forming a standard attack wedge," Wilson said. "They think we are going to hold position like a polite fleet." The tactical officer, a young woman named Lisa, looked at her screen. "Sir, they are sending in the drones. Thousands of them." "Drones," Wilson scoffed. "Machines. They have no soul. They have no instinct." The coalition unleashed a swarm of small, silver attack drones. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of mechanical fish. They were fast and agile. They were controlled by an advanced artificial intelligence. In a normal space battle, they would sweep away a human fleet in minutes. "Bring us about," Wilson ordered. "Engage manual control." "Manual control?" Sir Lisa asked. "The computer targeting is faster." "The computer is predictable," Wilson said. "Give me the stick." Wilson grabbed the pilot controls. The Vanguard was a stealth ship, but it was also built with thrusters that were too powerful for its hull. Wilson pushed the throttle forward. The ship jumped forward, but then he jerked the stick hard to the left. The ship spun on its side, a move that made the inertial dampeners scream. The drone swarm moved to intercept. They predicted the Vanguard would turn right to avoid the debris field. But Wilson didn't turn right. He spun the ship in a corkscrew motion, diving straight into the debris field. "He is flying into the rocks," the enemy drone commander thought, watching the sensors. But Wilson knew every rock in that field. He used the thrusters to sideswipe a large asteroid, using the impact to bounce the ship in a new direction. It was a violent, ugly way to fly. It damaged the hull. But it worked. The drone swarm AI could not understand why a captain would risk his ship on a rock. They paused for a fraction of a second to calculate. That fraction of a second was all Wilson needed. "Fire the scatter guns," Wilson commanded. The Vanguard spat out hundreds of flechette small metal needles in a wide arc. They were not accurate, but in the debris field, they didn't need to be. They shredded the delicate sensors of the drones. Confused and blinded, the drones crashed into each other and into the asteroids. "Unpredictability," Wilson said, leaning back in his chair. "It is the human advantage. They fight by the book. We burn the book." On the surface of Earth, the situation was different. It was close, dirty, and terrifying. In the ruins of what used to be a suburban district in Los Angeles, Sarah Miller was leading a team of scientists and soldiers. Sarah was not a soldier. She was a biologist. But today, she held a modified assault rifle. She wore a protective hazmat suit. She was not fighting with bullets, but with chemistry. The coalition troops were insectoid creatures. They relied on heavy armor and breathing filters to survive in Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. They were strong, but they were biological. They had weaknesses. "Contact left," yelled one of the soldiers. A squad of alien infantry came around the corner of a ruined house. They raised their plasma rifles. The human soldiers ducked behind a concrete barrier. The plasma bolts hit the concrete, turning it into glowing slag. "Sarah, do it!" the soldier shouted. Sarah stepped out from behind cover. She held a strange-looking launcher, made from parts of a plumbing system and a fuel tank. She fired it. It didn't shoot a rocket. It shot a canister that bounced once and then burst open. A thick, yellow gas filled the street. The aliens stopped. Their sensors detected the gas, but they thought it was a smoke screen. They marched through it, confident in their sealed armor. But Sarah had mixed something special. It was a synthetic acid designed to eat through the specific silicone compounds used in alien armor seals. It was a simple, brutal formula. The gas swirled around the aliens. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the aliens started to scratch at their necks. The seals on their armor were melting. The Earth's air, rich with bacteria and moisture, rushed into their suits. The insectoid aliens were not used to Earth's germs. They were not used to the humidity. Their lungs began to burn. They panicked, clawing at their helmets. Now! Sarah yelled. The human soldiers opened fire. They didn't use the fancy energy rifles the aliens had. They used heavy caliber kinetic rounds. The aliens were distracted, suffocating, and blinded. They fell one by one. They are tough, Sarah said, watching one of the aliens try to stand up. But they aren't adaptable. We adapt. We survive. The human soldiers moved forward, securing the street. This was the pattern of the ground war. The aliens had better technology. Their armor was stronger. Their guns were more powerful. But humans fought dirty. They used sound, acid, noise, and fear. They used the environment. They lured enemies into traps that had been dug weeks ago. In the command bunker, James Miller watched the reports come in. The map of the world was a patchwork of green zones and red zones. The aliens were trying to land more troops, but the orbital railguns were making it very expensive. "Sir, we have a problem," David Kim said. His face was pale. "Talk to me," Miller said. "They are changing tactics. They are not trying to capture the cities anymore. They are moving their fleet to the dark side of the moon." Miller stood up and walked to the holographic table. "The dark side, why?" "I think they are regrouping," David said. "But look at this energy signature." Miller looked at the data. It was a spike in radiation. It was massive. It was a signature he had seen in simulations but never in real life. His heart skipped a beat. "Is that what I think it is?" Miller asked. "It's a planet killer, sir," David whispered. "They are charging the main weapon." A planet killer was exactly what it sounded like. It was a massive cannon designed to crack the crust of a planet. It would cause earthquakes, volcanoes, and tidal waves. It would not just kill the armies, it would kill the planet itself. Forlax, or whoever was left in charge, had decided that if they could not have Earth, no one could. How long? At current charge rate 2 hours, David said. After that, we have about 10 minutes before the beam hits the crust. Miller slammed his hand on the table. "We have to stop it?" "The weapon is on the dark side of the moon," David said. "Our railguns are on this side. By the time we rotate the satellites, it will be too late." Miller looked at the map of the fleet. The Vanguard was the only ship fast enough to get there. But even the Vanguard could not destroy a planet killer alone. It was too big. It had shields that could withstand a nuclear explosion. "We need a distraction," Miller said. "A big one." He looked at the tactical map. The coalition fleet was still protecting the flank of the planet killer. They were a wall of steel. "Open a channel to the Vanguard," Miller ordered. "Get me Captain Wilson." A moment later, Wilson's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired. We are busy here, Commander. The drones are swarming again. Bob, listen to me, Miller said. They are charging a planet killer behind the moon. They intend to glass Earth. We have maybe 90 minutes. Wilson's expression hardened. Understood. What is the plan? I can't shoot it from here, Miller said. You have to get in there. But you can't do it alone, you need to break their line. Wilson looked at his crew. We have one trick left, Commander. The stealth drive is shot. We can't hide. Then don't hide, Miller said. Make them look at you. Be the loudest thing in the solar system. Wilson smiled. It was a cold smile. I like loud. Miller looked at David. Ready the reserves. Every ship we have left. The freighters, the shuttles, everything. We are going to hit them with everything we have. The next hour was the longest in human history. In the silence of the command bunker, the only sound was the hum of the computers and the breathing of the staff. On the surface, people looked up at the sky. The falling debris had stopped, but a new fear was rising. They could not see the weapon charging behind the moon, but they could feel it. High in orbit, the EDS Vanguard turned away from the safety of the Earth's shadow. It moved toward the moon. It was a suicide run. Captain Wilson sat in the command chair. He knew he probably wasn't coming back. But that was the human way. You don't survive because you are stronger. You survive because you are willing to do what the other guy won't. All hands, Wilson's voice echoed through the ship. This is the captain. We are going to punch a hole in the enemy line. We are going to take the hits. We are going to make them scream. Not for us. For the dirt below us. For the air we breathe. For Earth. The crew cheered. It was a raw, ragged sound. Engage engines, Wilson said. The Vanguard roared to life. It accelerated toward the coalition blockade. It was a single ship against 100. But it carried the rage of a whole species with it. The war for Earth had entered its final, most desperate phase. Humanity had shown they could fight. Now, they had to show they could win. The silence of space was absolute, but inside the EDS Vanguard, the noise was deafening. Alums screamed, metal groaned under stress, and the crew shouted orders over the roar of the engines. Captain Robert Wilson gripped the arms of his chair as the ship shook violently. Shields at 30%. Yelled Lisa, the tactical officer. They are targeting us with everything they have. Wilson looked at the main screen. The Vanguard was diving straight into the heart of the coalition fleet. It was like a fly trying to sting a swarm of angry hornets. Plasma bolts and railgun rounds slammed against the ship's hull. The black paint was scorched, and pieces of the armor were flying off into space. Hold the line. Wilson commanded. Don't break formation. We have to get their attention. And they did. The entire enemy fleet turned to look at the crazy human ship attacking them. They diverted their fire from the other incoming targets to focus on the Vanguard. This was exactly what Wilson wanted. In the command bunker on Earth, James Miller watched the tactical map. He saw the red dots of the alien ships bunching up around the Vanguard. He saw the clear path opening up behind them. Now, Miller said, his voice low and hard. Send in the swarm. It was not a swarm of high-tech battleships. It was a ragged fleet of whatever humanity could fly. Old freighters, rusty mining vessels, and even retrofitted passenger ships launched from the surface and the hidden moon bases. They were flying one-way missions. David Kim watched the data streams flood his screens. The enemy sensors are confused, sir. They are picking up thousands of small signals. Their targeting computers don't know which ship to lock onto. They are looking for a military fleet, Miller said. They aren't looking for angry farmers in mining ships. The ragged fleet swarmed toward the gap the Vanguard had created. They carried simple, dangerous cargo. They were packed with explosives. They were like a hive of bees, sacrificing themselves to sting the giant. High above the battle, the massive shadow of the moon began to slide away. There, hiding in the darkness, was the planet killer. It was a terrifying machine, larger than any city on Earth. It was shaped like a jagged spear, pointed down at the planet. The tip of the spear was glowing with a blinding white light. The energy build-up was massive. They are almost fully charged, David said, his voice shaking slightly. 15 minutes until impact. Wilson saw the planet killer on his screen, too. The Vanguard was taking heavy damage. Sparks flew from the ceiling, and a console exploded near the helm. "We can't breach that shield, Captain," Lisa shouted. "The planet killer has a defensive barrier too strong for our weapons." Wilson looked at his ship. The Vanguard was dying. But it still had its heart. "We don't need to shoot through the shield, Lisa. We need to break the generator." "The generator is inside the ship," Lisa argued. "Then we go inside," Wilson said. He turned the ship toward the planet killer. "Prepare for impact." The crew paused for a second. They knew what he meant. "Captain, the warp core," the helmsman said quietly. "If we detonate the core next to their shield generator, it will collapse the field," Wilson said. "The rest of the fleet can destroy it." Wilson stood up. "This is an order. Abandoned ship is not an option. We are too heavy. We need the mass. Set the warp core to overload and lock the controls on a collision course. Then, get to the escape pods." "No, sir," Lisa said, tears in her eyes. "We stay with the ship. We guide it in." Wilson looked at his crew. They were young. They should have had long lives. But he saw pride in their eyes. They were not afraid to die to save their world. "Very well," Wilson said softly. "For Earth." The Vanguard turned, smoking and burning, and aimed directly for the planet killer's engine exhaust. The alien ships tried to stop it, but the ragged fleet of human suicide drones slammed into them, creating chaos. The Vanguard slipped through the net. In the bunker, Miller watched the dot representing the Vanguard move toward the massive enemy ship. "Come on, Bob," he whispered. The Vanguard hit the energy barrier of the planet killer. The ship's hull crumpled, but it kept going, pushed by its immense momentum and the desperate fury of its engines. It plowed through the shield and crashed into the rear engineering section of the massive weapon. The explosion was silent, but it was brighter than a star. The warp core detonated. The shock wave tore through the planet killer, shattering its spine. Directly below the moon, on the surface of Earth, people looked up. They didn't know what happened, but they saw a flash of light brighter than the sun. It lit up the night side of the planet. For a moment, it was daytime. Miller watched the sensors. "The shield is down. The planet killer is vulnerable." "Sir," David said, "the planet killer is turning. It is still trying to fire." The weapon was damaged, but the aliens were desperate. They tried to fire the beam even while the ship was breaking apart. The beam lanced out, but it was unstable. It missed the planet. It shot wide, grazing the upper atmosphere, creating a terrifying green aurora that circled the globe. They missed, Miller said, breathing out. They missed. But the threat wasn't over. The damaged planet killer was still dangerous. It was drifting closer to low Earth orbit. If it fell, it would cause massive destruction even without the beam. We need to finish it, Miller said. Sir, the ragged fleet is out of ammo, David said. Everyone has fired their payload. Miller looked at the map of the solar system. He saw a lone dot moving fast from the direction of Mars. It was a human ship, but it wasn't a warship. It was a transport ship, the ESV Hope. It had been ferrying supplies between the colonies. It had no weapons. Who is that? Miller asked. It's the Hope, sir, David said. Commander, it is piloted by Captain Wilson's brother, Thomas. Thomas Wilson saw the destruction of his brother's ship on his monitors. He was a cargo pilot, not a soldier. He flew heavy, slow ships. But he knew what his brother had done. He saw the wounded planet killer limping in space. The Hope was carrying industrial mining explosives. They were not designed for war, but there were thousands of tons of them in the cargo hold. Bob, you idiot, Thomas whispered to the silence of space. You always had to be the hero. Thomas keyed his microphone. Earth Command, this is the Hope. I have a heavy payload. I am going to deliver it to the front door. Miller heard the voice. It was calm, just like Bob's. Thomas, that ship has no shields. You won't make it? I have gravity, Thomas said. I am coming in from above the solar plane. They aren't watching there. The Hope adjusted its course. It was a heavy ship, full of ore and explosives. It wasn't fast, but it was heavy. Very heavy. Thomas aimed his ship not at the engines, but at the central control tower of the planet killer. He engaged the emergency thrusters, pushing the engines to the red line. The alien ship tried to swivel its point defense guns, but it was too slow. It was focused on the battle below. The Hope slammed into the side of the planet killer like a hammer hitting a glass vase. The mining explosives in the cargo hold detonated all at once. The explosion ripped the enemy ship in half. The secondary reactors on the alien ship went critical. The planet killer erupted in a massive ball of fire. The debris scattered harmlessly into space, burning up as it entered the atmosphere or drifting away as shooting stars. In the bunker, the red dot vanished from the screen. Target destroyed, David said. He sounded like he couldn't believe it. The planet killer is gone. The room erupted in cheers. Staff members hugged each other. Some fell to their knees in relief. The weapon that was going to end the world was now just dust. James Miller stood still. He felt a heavy weight lift from his shoulders, but he also felt the pain of loss. Bob Wilson, his brother, and thousands of other humans were gone. They had given everything so that the people below could see another sunrise. Sir, David said, looking at a new screen. The enemy fleet is retreating. Miller looked at the main tactical display. The remaining coalition ships had seen their superweapon destroyed. They had seen the humans sacrifice their own ships to destroy the invincible. They had no more stomach for the fight. They were turning their ships around and engaging their faster-than-light drives, fleeing the solar system as fast as they could. They are running, Miller said. Let them go. Sir, a tactical officer asked. Should we pursue? No, Miller said firmly. We are not them. We do not hunt for sport. We fight to protect our home. If they leave, we let them go. but they will take a message back to the galaxy. Miller walked to the communication console. He picked up the microphone. This signal would be broadcast on every frequency, across every star system the fleeing ships would pass through. "Attention Coalition forces," Miller said. "This is Earth. You came here to conquer. You found something else. You are leaving alive only because we allow it. Go back to your council. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them that Earth is not quiet. Tell them that if you come back, we will not just fight you. We will end you." He set the microphone down. The war was over. The blockade was broken. The silence that had covered the planet for 10 years was gone forever. In its place was a new sound. It was the sound of humanity's roar echoing through the stars. The dust did not settle quickly in space. The debris from the great battle floated in the darkness, catching the light of the distant sun. It was a graveyard of ships. The remains of the planet killer glittered like a field of broken diamonds, a monument to the most powerful weapon the galaxy had ever seen, now reduced to nothing but scrap metal. Inside the command bunker, the noise had stopped. The shouting was over. The alarms were silent. The hum of the computers was the only sound left. Commander James Miller stood in the center of the room. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. He looked at the large screen on the wall. The red enemy dots were gone. The solar system was clear. "Report," Miller said. His voice was rough from hours of shouting orders. David Kim looked at his screen. He typed a few commands, checking the sensors. "Sir, the enemy fleet has left the system completely. They jumped to faster than light speed 10 minutes ago. They are running back to Coalition space." Miller nodded slowly. "And the damage?" David paused. He looked at a list of numbers that made him sad. "Sir, we lost the Vanguard. We lost the Hope. We lost 40% of the orbital defense platforms. On the ground, the cities of New York, London, and Tokyo have heavy damage. But the shelters held. Civilian casualties are low." Miller took a deep breath. "Low casualties? Against the strongest fleet in the galaxy? That is a miracle." "It wasn't a miracle, sir," David said quietly. "It was planning." Miller looked around the room. The staff was slumped in their chairs. Some were crying. Others were staring at the screens with empty eyes. They had been awake for 2 days. They had seen the face of death and spit in it. "You all did a good job," Miller said to them. "Now, go home. Get some sleep. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow." The staff slowly stood up. They walked out of the room like zombies. Miller watched them go. He knew they would never forget this day. The world had changed. The innocence was gone. Humanity was no longer a child playing in the sandbox. They were now a warrior. Above the planet, the view was breathtaking. The Earth spun in the void, a blue and white marble. It looked peaceful. But now, orbiting the planet were the scars of battle. Broken hulls of alien ships drifted among the few remaining human satellites. On the surface, the cities began to wake up. The heavy blast doors of the underground bunkers opened. People climbed out into the sunlight. They blinked in the bright day. They looked up at the sky and saw the smoke trails of the ships that had defended them. In New York, Sarah Miller walked out of a subway entrance. She took off her gas mask and breathed in the air. It smelled of smoke and burning rubber, but to her, it was the sweetest smell in the world. She was covered in dirt, and her hazmat suit was torn, but she was alive. Around her, the city was a mess. Buildings were crushed. Fires were burning. But people were helping each other. A young man was helping an old woman walk over a pile of rubble. A neighbor was sharing water with another neighbor. The aliens had expected the humans to panic. They had expected chaos and selfishness. Instead, they found unity. Sarah looked for her husband, James. She knew he was deep underground. She would see him soon. She looked up at the sky and saw the debris falling. It looked like shooting stars. Each falling star was a piece of the enemy fleet. They are gone, she whispered to herself. We really did it. In the depths of the city subway system, Forlax was hiding. He was crouched in a dark tunnel, surrounded by water and rats. He was the High Admiral of the Coalition, but now, he looked like a frightened animal. His expensive armor was scratched and covered in grime. He had lost his communication device. He had lost his shuttle. He was alone. He heard footsteps echoing in the tunnel. He froze. He expected to see human soldiers coming to kill him. He raised his plasma pistol, his hand shaking. The footsteps got closer. A light appeared around the corner. It was a flashlight. Forlax was about to fire, but then he saw who it was. It was not a soldier. It was a human boy, maybe 10 years old. The boy was holding a flashlight and a bag. He looked at Forlax with wide eyes. The boy didn't scream. He didn't run. He just looked at the alien warrior. Forlax realized then that the humans were not afraid of him anymore. They had faced his entire fleet and won. A single alien meant nothing to them now. Go away, Forlax hissed. The boy turned and ran away. Forlax slumped back against the wall. He knew the war was over. He knew the humans would hunt him down eventually. But for now, he was just a ghost in the dark, waiting for the end. 2 days later, the silence that had started the war was replaced by a broadcast. James Miller sat in the repaired communication center. He looked into the camera. This transmission would go out across the galaxy. It would travel faster than light, reaching the Coalition homeworlds and every other civilization in the Milky Way. This is Commander James Miller of the Earth Defense Force, Miller said. His face was serious. He did not smile. He did not look angry. He just looked strong. You thought we were quiet because we were weak, Miller said to the stars. You thought you could contain us. You thought you could decide our future. You were wrong. The silence is over. We are awake now. We have seen your technology, and we have defeated it. We do not want to conquer the galaxy. We do not want to rule over anyone. But we make this promise to everyone who is listening. Earth is not a protectorate. Earth is not a zoo. Earth is a fortress. Miller leaned closer to the camera. If you come in peace, we will welcome you as friends. But if you come to take what is ours, we will fight you with everything we have. We will never surrender. We will never be silent again. He nodded to David, and the transmission ended. The signal shot out into the dark of space. It carried a warning to the bullies and a promise of hope to the oppressed. On the bridge of the retreating Coalition flagship, the new commander watched the transmission. He saw the human face. He saw the resolve in his eyes. He remembered the burning ships and the unexpected ferocity of the human defense. He deleted the orders to send reinforcements. He knew that Earth was a trap. It was a beautiful, blue trap. Back on Earth, James Miller walked out of the bunker for the first time in a week. The sun was setting. The sky was painted with colors of orange and purple. The air was cool. He met Sarah outside. They hugged each other tight. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. They stood together and watched the first stars appear in the sky. "Look," Sarah said, pointing up. "The brightest one. That's the Vanguard debris, isn't it?" James nodded. "Yes. And the one next to it is the Hope." "They are still there," Sarah said. "Watching over us." "Yes," James said. "They are." The galaxy had thought the silence of Earth was a mystery. It had been a puzzle to be solved. Now, the galaxy knew the truth. The silence was the gathering of strength. It was the loading of a gun. James looked at the horizon. The cities were rebuilding. The factories were starting up again. Humans were already planning new ships, better weapons, and faster engines. The war had not broken them. It had made them stronger. The day Earth went quiet was just a memory. It was a ghost story told in alien taverns to frighten young cadets. But the humans, they didn't tell ghost stories. They just looked up at the stars and dared anyone to come back. The silence was over. The roar had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same.